This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Go to the link in the description below so they know that I sent you. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsa, and in this video I'm going to go over the draft archetypes for Modern Horizons, which was just recently fully spoiled. Modern Horizons is a set with 10 very clearly delineated color pairs, as most supplemental sets have, and in this video I'm going to talk about what each of these color pairs wants to do and the synergies within them. In this video I won't generally be talking about cards like super efficient removal or bombs, unless they have some special synergy within the color pair we're looking at, as those are good in pretty much any deck. If you want to see a discussion about those types of cards, I also did a video on the best commons and uncommons in the set that goes over most of them, and tomorrow's MTG Top 10 will be on the biggest bombs in the format. Now, let's get started with the first color pair, which is blue-green. Every color pair in this format has a signpost uncommon. In other words, there's an uncommon card that has both the colors that really sort of shows you exactly what that color pair wants to be doing. For blue-green, it's Abominable Tree Folk. It has power and toughness equal to the number of snow permanents you control. This is pretty great, especially when it's attached to a creature or also taps down a creature for a turn. And you'll notice also that Abominable Tree Folk itself is a snow creature. That's an important thing for this color pair. Note he says snow permanents, so he actually counts himself. At worst, he's like a 4-mana 1/1 that taps something down, but you want him to be a lot better than that. One key to this format is to keep in mind that there are snow basic lands. Every pack has a snow basic land in it. There aren't regular basic lands in this set, and these snow lands are important for a few reasons. One of them is that they count as snow permanents for stuff like Abominable Tree Folk, and another reason is because they produce snow mana, which a few cards in this set ask for. If you're in the blue-green deck and you have lots of good snow payoffs, you may want to start taking snow-covered lands a little higher than you normally would, because they're going to be pretty great in your deck. So what are the payoffs for having snow permanents? Well, there's the one we already talked about in Abominable Tree Folk. There is also Blizzard Strix, which can blink a creature if you have a snow permanent in play. This can be particularly nice with creatures with Enter the Battlefield abilities, like Abominable Tree Folk, who would get to tap something down again. There's Chiller Pillar, which is one of these cards that uses snow mana. Those two snow symbols for his monstrosity cost mean you have to produce mana with a snow permanent to pay for it. So this includes your snow-covered lands and a few other cards we'll talk about. And he becomes a 5/5 with flying if you can pay that monstrosity cost. There's also Iceberg Cancrix. This one mills players when you play snow permanents. I'm not huge on Iceberg Cancrix, but it would be interesting if you could get a lot of snow permanents. There's also Winter's Rest, which is basically only going to be good in a deck that has lots of snow permanents, because only in a deck with lots of snow permanents does it tap that creature down and make it unable to untap for as long as the aura remains in play. It's also a snow permanent itself. There's also Frostwalla, a reference to Rootwalla, and just like Rootwalla, you can pay 1 mana to give it +2/+2 until end of turn, but you have to do it with snow mana here. There's Glacial Revelation, which lets you put any snow permanents from the top 6 cards of your library into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Not sure on the number of snow permanents you would need for Glacial Revelation to be worth it, but I would guess around 10, but that's perfectly doable with snow-covered lands. There's Rime Tender, which can be used to untap a snow permanent. This can be useful for creatures, but you can also use it to untap snow-covered lands for ramp. There's Frostwalk Bastion, which itself is a snow land, which means it produces snow mana that can be used on things like Frostwalla and Chiller Pillar, but you can also turn it into a creature. It's a creature land. If you have snow mana, you can make it into a creature, and it locks things down when it does damage to them, as many cold-themed cards do. There's also Icehide Golem, which for only 1 snow mana is a 2/2. If your deck has enough snow lands, that could be interesting, but I think most of the time it will get weak as the game goes on and probably isn't worth it. Conifer Worm is another snow creature. It's a big trampler that also can pump itself equal to the number of snow permanents you control. There's also Arkham's Astrolabe, which costs a snow mana. Itself is a snow artifact, so it can produce snow mana because it fixes your mana, it filters it, and it draws you a card when it comes into play. There are also 2 other cards in the set, at common and uncommon anyway, that are not snow payoffs but are snow permanents, and we'll mention those real quickly. They are Saddled Rhymestag, which it isn't difficult at all to play in this deck because it's green, and Alpine Guide, who I think this deck will actually be less interested in than like the red-green deck, which we'll look at later, but he is a snow creature, so there he is. What are the rares that are snow-related? Well, you have Ice Fang Coatl, who's your exact 2 colors, right? Additionally, if you have at least 3 other snow permanents, it gains Death Touch. Merit Lage's Slumber lets you scry every time you play a snow permanent. If you have enough snow permanents, that alone is enough of a reason to play Merit Lage's Slumber. But if you happen to get 10 or more snow permanents in play, which is probably Magical Christmas Land in a limited format, but hey, if you do it, Merit Lage comes alive and is a 20/20 creature who can just win the game in a single swing. There's also 2 cards in other colors that like snow, but they're probably going to be at their best in this deck because you're going to have the most snow permanents. On Thin Ice lets you enchant a snow land you control and it exiles a creature as long as that On Thin Ice stays in play. It is worth noting that that one might be a little more easy to play in a white deck. If you just happen to pick up like 4 snow lands in your draft and you're a white deck that doesn't care about snow otherwise, playing On Thin Ice might be worth it. Dead of Winter, though, doesn't really make sense anywhere else except this deck. It is awesome in this deck because it lets you just kill all the non-snow creatures in most cases and equal to the number of snow permanents you control. Your snow creatures just keep on living and having a good time. Luckily, this color pair has green, and green does let you splash, and splashing Dead of Winter seems like a really sweet thing to do to me. All right, the next color pair we'll look at is black-red, and it is goblins. Black-red Signpost uncommon is Munitions Expert, a goblin who comes into play and does damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of goblins you control. This means that it can do 1 damage all on its own, and it can do a lot more if you have other goblins. Goblin payoffs at common and uncommon are the Expert, as well as Sling Gang Lieutenant, who can throw goblins at your opponent and drain them life. Goblin Matron, who lets you search your library for a goblin card, like your Sling Gang Lieutenant or Munitions Expert. And those are really the only straight-up goblin payoffs there are. As we go through these other tribal color pairs, especially as we get to the black-white one, you'll see there are some sneaky goblins in this set, as well as some sneaky goblin payoffs. But these are the ones that are straight-up goblin payoffs. Here are some other goblins at common and uncommon. Goblin War Party, which can make you goblins. It can also pump your whole board, and it can do both if you entwine. Goblin Champion, which is interesting because it has Exalted and Haste, so on its own it can attack as a 1/2, and if it's just chilling out on your board, it makes it so whenever you have one creature who attacks alone, get bigger. Putrid Goblin, who has Persist, so he doesn't stay dead, at least the first time. And Ward-Eye Witch, who is a goblin who scries every time it or another creature you control dies. There's one rare that's really goblin-centric, and that's Pashalik Mons, who can make goblin creatures and has a goblin ability in that it does 1 damage to any target anytime a goblin dies. The next tribal color pair is red-white, and that one's all about slivers. Our signpost uncommon here is Lava Belly Sliver, and it says sliver creatures you control have, when this creature enters the battlefield, it does 1 damage to target player or planeswalker, and you gain 1 life. So it drains the opponent by 1, basically, except it can also hit players if you wanted to. I mean, planeswalkers if you wanted to. The thing that slivers have going for them is that every single sliver is also a sliver payoff. That's just how slivers work. And so in some ways, I think this may be the most well-supported of the tribal color pairs because of that, because all of them, like Lava Belly Sliver, give themselves and give other creatures who are slivers abilities. So even when you play Lava Belly Sliver on its own, it's going to do the 1 damage thing. So what are the slivers? Well, we've got Enduring Sliver, who can give Outlast to all slivers. It already has it itself. It doesn't have to give it to itself. And that means that you can pay 2 and tap those creatures to put a +1/+1 counter on them. First Sliver's Chosen gives them all Exalted, which means whenever a creature attacks alone, that creature gets +X equal to the number of instances of Exalted. And if you have a bunch of slivers in play and you play the Chosen, well, it's going to be pumping your creatures a lot. Lancer Sliver gives all your slivers First Strike. Hollowhead Sliver lets all your slivers rummage. Cleaving Sliver pumps all your slivers power. Bladeback Sliver has a Hellbent ability, meaning your hand has to be empty, and it lets you do 1 damage to players or planeswalkers anytime you tap any sliver. That sounds pretty ridiculous. If you manage to empty your hand, you can quickly kill your opponent. We have our friend Lava Belly Sliver as well. There are also off-color slivers. The other 3 colors all have 1 uncommon sliver. So red-white's sort of the core of this deck, but you can sort of branch out into other colors. Scuttling Sliver lets all your slivers be able to untap themselves. That one's honestly not that impressive to me, and I don't see a reason why you'd really want to be splashing it. Dregscape Sliver, though, I get. It's a sliver that has Unearth, and it gives Unearth to all slivers, which is awesome. That means they can all come back from your graveyard for a turn. Tempered Sliver makes it so that whenever your creatures deal combat damage to a player, they get a +1/+1 counter. So what are the rares for slivers? Well, there's Spiteful Sliver, which makes it so that all your slivers do damage equal to the damage they take to a player or planeswalker. Cloud Shredder Sliver, which gives them all flying and haste. And the First Sliver, which is 5 colors, sort of, I guess, good luck figuring out a way to pay for all of that, which gives all of your slivers Cascade. The next tribal color pair is blue-black, and it's all about ninjas. This color pair is sort of less about ninja payoffs and more about finding ways to use ninjutsu effectively. That's the ability you see here. Ninjutsu is an ability where if your creature is unblocked, you can use the ninjutsu on a creature in your hand, in this case your Ingenious Infiltrator. He comes into play, the creature who's unblocked goes to your hand, and then the ninja deals damage to the player, and then most of them have some sort of ability related to that. In case of Ingenious Infiltrator, you get to draw a card. So let's look at the other cards with ninjutsu at common and uncommon. There is, in addition to our Ingenious Infiltrator, Moonblade Shinobi, who makes a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with flying anytime it does combat damage to a player. Azra Smoke Shaper, who makes a creature indestructible until end of turn when it comes down. That can be particularly spicy if, like, you have another creature who is blocked, and all of a sudden you make it indestructible after you ninjutsu Azra Smoke Shaper into play, and now that creature wins that combat. Ninja of the New Moon, a little less interesting than the other three. It doesn't do anything when it damages players. You can just do 6 damage to them out of nowhere. And like I said, the real goal is to find ways to really make ninjutsu do extra work for you. And some ways to abuse ninjutsu are both finding ways for your creatures to be difficult to block so you can use ninjutsu a lot, and ways to abuse Enter the Battlefield abilities because you return the creature to your hand that you were attacking with before the ninja comes into play. So Phantom Ninja fits into this perfectly. It has the right creature type, and it's unblockable. So it's a great one to support ninjutsu. Fairy Seer is nice because you can play it early, and it has a nice Enter the Battlefield ability that lets you scry 2, which is definitely valuable. And then, you know, it's evasive, so you can attack with it. You can ninjutsu your creature into play, and then play the Fairy Seer again and get to scry again, and you can sort of keep doing that. Mana War, if you can manage to have your creature be unblocked if it's Mana War, which is interesting. I mean, sometimes you'll attack people in this format and they really won't be thinking as much as they should about ninjutsu. Maybe they are, but they're not thinking about how you can abuse it. And if you are able to ninjutsu a creature into play, return Mana War, and then play Mana War again, you're going to be in business. Same thing with Pondering Mage. You get to use that ability again. Same thing with Watcher for Tomorrow. You get to hide away a card every time it enters the battlefield, and you get to put that card into your hand every time it leaves the battlefield, whether it dies or otherwise. Changeling Outcast has the ninja creature type, technically. It is a changeling, and it can't block or be blocked. And that means that it's another good one, like Fairy Seer, to play on turn 1 and start getting your ninjutsu going. First Sphere Gargantua is interesting. The main thing you want to do with it is, you know, attack with it, have it get through, and then maybe ninjutsu something into place. You get that ability again. Same thing with Grave Shifter, which also counts as a ninja because of Changeling. Same thing with Sling Gang Lieutenant. You get extra goblins. There are really only 2 payoffs for the actual ninja creature type in the set at common or uncommon, and they are Smoke Shroud, which is pretty cool because when a ninja comes into play, if it's in your graveyard, it just comes out of your graveyard attached to that ninja, which if it had ninjutsu, well, you're going to be in business. Throat Seeker gives all of your unblocked attacking ninjas lifelink, and that's pretty nice too. Rares include Fallen Shinobi, which I think is one of the biggest bombs in the entire set. Spoiler alert if you are waiting for the MTG Top 10 tomorrow. It has decent stats as a 5-mana 5/4 already, but the fact that you can ninjutsu it into play and then exile 2 cards from your opponent's library and then cast those cards is absolutely absurd. It can quickly run away with the game. Even if you just hit them once with it, you're probably just going to win. If you do it more than once, well, you're definitely going to win. Mist Syndicate Naga is fun because when you ninjutsu it into play, it then makes... when it does damage to the opponent, it then makes a copy of itself, and so now you can just sort of endlessly make more and more Mist Syndicate Nagas if you can find a way to get them through for damage. The last of the tribal color pairs is black-white, and it is sort of tribal and not tribal at the same time, and that's because the tribe is Changelings. Cards with Changeling have every single creature type, and you'll notice that the black overlaps with the Ninja deck and with the Goblin deck, and the white overlaps with the Slivers. So this deck can take advantage of cards that are good for those creatures because most of the creatures in this deck are Changelings and have every creature type. Etchings of the Chosen is the signpost uncommon. It lets you choose a creature type and give all your creatures of that type +1/+1. You'll name whatever creature type is the most common in your deck, and obviously your Changelings will all get the bonus from this. It also lets you sacrifice creatures of that chosen type and make something else indestructible until end of turn. So let's look at the Changelings. Keep in mind, all of these Changelings can fit into the tribal decks we've already looked at. I didn't show them when I was looking at each of those tribes because I knew I'd show them here. So the first Changeling we're looking at is a regular Cohort. It's a 4-mana 2/2 that puts another 2/2 Changeling into play. Obviously, you can put it into your Sliver deck and it'll be pretty good there. Next up, we have Imposter of the 6th Pride. just another changeling that will fit in with this deck as well as in the Sliver deck. Then there's Changeling Outcast, who we've seen before. He's nice in the Ninja deck because he allows your ninjas to get in with their ninjutsu. Obviously, he also works in the Goblin deck because he counts as a Goblin. Venomous Changeling, a nice 3-mana 1/3 with Death Touch. It's nice that it can trade with lots of things. It's nice that it can block 2/2s really well and obviously kill them. And it's nice that it counts as a Goblin when that matters, as well as any other creature type when that matters. There's also one Artifact Changeling, just, 1-mana 1/1 Changeling. If you have enough creature payoffs, creature type payoffs, obviously it's worth it. So in addition to these creatures sort of fitting in within whatever tribe they need to, obviously they fit in with this deck, and there are some cards that are basically there as Changeling payoffs. The best example of this is probably Valiant Changeling, which costs 5 less mana if you have a Changeling in play. Obviously, what it says is that it costs 1 less to cast for each creature type among creatures you control. Each of your Changelings counts as every creature type, so it'll always make this a 2-mana 3/3 with Double Strike, which is a pretty great deal. This is the deck where it's going to be at its best. It'll probably be sort of okay in a lot of decks, but this is the deck where it will consistently just cost 2 white mana. Also, like I said, all the Sliver bonuses work in this deck. I said that, you could put this into your red-white Slivers deck. You could put Changelings into it. It works the other way, too. The Slivers fit into the Changeling deck because all your creatures are Slivers. I don't have all the Slivers here. I have Lancer Slivers standing in as an example because we already looked at all the Slivers. Then there are some creatures that have bonuses they add to other creature types, but they're creature types that aren't all that common in this set, and as a result, the cards that are like lords for creature types that are sort of obscure in this set are going to be at their best here. For example, King of the Pride is a cat lord. He gives +2/+1 to cats, which is great, except there aren't that many cats in the set, except that there are because of Changelings. Sling Gang Lieutenant we've seen before. It can hurl goblins at people. That means it can also hurl Changelings at people. Undead Augur has a sort of zombie lord ability, an ability that makes it so all your zombies do something. There aren't that many zombies in the set, but guess what? There are lots of Changelings, and it works with them. Then there's Return from Extinction. This will work okay in your Goblin decks because you have enough Goblins and Changelings, but it's probably better in this deck, since this deck will have the easiest time having 2 creatures in the graveyard with a shared creature type. And you really don't want to be playing Return from Extinction most of the time unless you're getting 2 cards back, in which case it'll be pretty good, and this deck will be pretty good at doing that. There are a couple of rares that are well suited to this deck. One of them is Morophon the Boundless, a shapeshifter and a Changeling. It pumps all the creatures of a creature type you choose. Obviously in your Changeling deck, it's not going to matter a lot of the time. Also makes all the creature spells of that creature type cost less, and that'll be easiest to make work in the Changeling deck because, again, all your Changelings are all creature types. Cordial Vampires, sort of like the Cat Lord that we saw, and the Zombie that we saw that do special bonuses for creatures of their creature type, but there aren't that many vampires in this set, so Changelings is where you're going to get the most advantage out of this ability to put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. So yeah, those are the 4 tribal creature types. I think it's pretty cool design-wise that you have the 3 main tribal creature types, but then you also have Changelings, which sort of fits into the other ones when it needs to, and can be its own thing when it needs to. Overall, this set has a lot of really cool, unique archetypes. Another one of those is the Blue-Red archetype, which is a card draw deck. Obviously, Blue-Red usually likes drawing cards as it is, but in this set, drawing cards comes with some extra bonuses. Our Signpost Uncommon here of Thundering Djinn does a good job of explaining exactly how that works. It's a 5-mana 3/4 with flying, decent stats, but what really gets it to being a powerful card is that every time it attacks, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of cards you've drawn this turn. Sometimes that'll just be 1, but if you can draw multiple cards in your turn, Thundering Djinn's going to be insane. And I think there are plenty of ways to draw at least 2 cards consistently enough that Thundering Djinn's going to be pretty insane. So let's look at the other draw payoffs in addition to our friend Thundering Djinn. We've also got Archetypes, who as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards in the turn becomes a 3/2 with flying. We've also got Onerophage, who gets a +1/+1 counter every single time you draw a card, which means every turn it's going to get +1/+1 counter. Hopefully it gets even more than that if you have more ways to draw cards. Fists of Flame is both a way to draw a card and to draw a payoff, which is nice. It gives +1/+0 in trample to a creature for each card you've drawn in a turn, in addition to drawing you a card. So say you use it on your Thundering Djinn, you get to draw a card off of it, it gets a +2/+0 bonus, etc. It's always going to give at least +2/+0 in trample, which is nice if you're using it on your turn, and chances are you will, and sometimes it'll do even more than that. Spinehorn Minotaur, like Archetypes, it really specifically wants you to draw 2 or more cards in a turn, and when you do, it gets Double Strike. So how do we draw cards at common and uncommon in this color pair? Well, So I have here Choking Tethers sort of standing in for all the cards with Cycling. They're all going to be nice in any deck because they have added flexibility. Cycling is always a very powerful ability and limited because it means a card is always going to be able to do something, even if it's just cycling. The ones that are the most powerful are the ones that do something when you cycle them, like Choking Tethers, which lets you tap something. So if you can just cycle through a bunch of cards, you're going to get huge bonuses on the payoffs that we just looked at, and being able to do that is pretty nice. So playing a lot of cards with Cycling is probably a good idea in this color pair. We also got Everdream, which lets you splice the ability to draw a card onto other instants and sorceries, or you can just draw a card with it itself. But if you're able to consistently splice this onto things, you're going to be able to continue to fuel your cards that care about you drawing cards. Pondering Mage draws you a card when it comes into play. It does a little more than that, but for this deck is what matters, is it draws you a card. Reign of Revelation draws you 3 cards at instant speed, and then you discard a card, but that's going to be particularly good with the Djinn. Scour All Possibilities allows you to scry 2, then draw a card, meaning on back-to-back turns you can easily draw 2 cards to trigger those cards that care about 2 or more cards. Hollow Head Sliver lets you rummage. Phantasmal Form is kind of an interesting card in general. I think it's a hard one to gauge for a limited format because in some ways it looks sort of like a one-shot card that normally wouldn't be very good. Paying 3 to give 2 things, make 2 things into a 3/3 flyer until end of turn usually isn't that great. Sure, you get in for 6 damage, but then you're down a card. This has draw a card attached to it, meaning you're not really down a card when you use it. So this may actually be better than most of these effects we've seen before, and I think in this deck may be at its best. Though, it also has some applications probably in the Ninja deck. So what rares work well in this deck? Well, rares that draw you cards. For example, we've got Archmage's Charm. Obviously, it's got triple blue as its mana cost. It's not always going to be easy to make it work, but it can draw you cards, and that's nice, in addition to having 2 other useful abilities. Mirrodin Besieged, if you pick the Phyrexian option, which I think is usually what you're going to want to do with it, because there aren't that many artifacts in this set. Certainly not enough, usually, to name Mirrodin with it. If you name Phyrexian, you get to rummage every turn. The rest of the text there about 15 or more artifact cards in your graveyard just isn't going to happen, but looting every single turn is great, and that's what it's going to do for you. It is worth noting that it doesn't trigger all of the cards we saw really effectively because it only draws you the card at your instep, but it does have some uses in this deck. Bizarre Trade Mage lets you draw 2 cards and discard 3. Obviously, you go down a card in the end there, but it gives you some nice card selection. It's particularly good in the mid to late game if you have 2 or 3 cards in your hand and like 2 of them are lands and you don't really need them. And you can play Bizarre Trade Mage and pitch those lands and get a couple real spells. Echo of Eons seems really spicy in this deck because you draw 7 cards with it. Your opponent does too, but if you have like your Djinn in play, they're probably just dead. Also has flashback, which is great. So blue-red it's basically a spells deck, things we've seen before, but it has a little bit of an extra angle on it that we haven't seen before, and that is all about drawing cards and getting bonuses for it. Next, let's look at green-white, which is described by Wizards R&D essentially as creature fall. In other words, anytime a creature enters the battlefield, you get some sort of effect on a lot of the cards in green and white. Good Fortune Unicorn, for example, shows you that every time a creature comes into play, when you trigger creature fall, if you will, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. That's pretty powerful. In addition, this deck, because of the creature fall angle and wanting to get as much creature fall as possible, also has lots of ways to make tokens, so this color pair is probably also the best at making tokens in this format. Let's look at other cards with creature fall. We, of course, have our Unicorn. Other examples include Bellowing Elk, which becomes indestructible and gains trample. Pretty nice on your 4/2 if you can play a creature on your turn. Saddled Rhymestag gets +2/+2 if you've played a creature on your turn. That's pretty great for a 2-mana creature. Answered Prayers gains you a life and then turns into a 3/3 angel every time you play a creature. Zhalfirin Decoy gains the ability to tap things down every time you play a creature. So, how do you go about triggering creature fall consistently? Well, one of the best ways is to make creature tokens, and to do it with one card that makes creature tokens maybe on 2 separate turns. Thus, you can trigger creature fall 2 turns in a row. Examples of this are things like Battle Screech, which is just a great card in general, but in this particular deck, you can use it to make the 2 bird tokens 1 turn to get your creature fall triggers going, then the next turn you can flash it back. Frequently, it's just best to cast all of this, both the regular card and the flashback, so you just paid 4 for 4/1/1 flyers all in 1 turn. Usually that's the best thing to do, but you do have an option if you have some really good creature fall thing going on to delay that. Another thing that's worth noting is the way creature fall is worded is you don't actually have to play a creature or get a creature into play. It just has to enter the battlefield one way or another. And ephemerate counts. These sort of blink effects count. So sometimes, especially if you have creatures that already have enter the battlefield abilities, if you can ephemerate them to also get creature fall going, you're going to feel pretty good. Recruit the Worthy is a way to make a token that has buyback, so you can trigger creature fall every turn as long as you have 4 mana. Splicer's Skill makes a Golem artifact creature token, but you can also splice it onto other things to make sure that you're making creatures every turn. Mother Bear can trigger creature fall early, and then she makes creatures when she's in your graveyard, meaning, again, you can trigger creature fall over 2 separate turns. Squirrel Nest is the kind of card that can make sure you always trigger creature fall while you also go wide with squirrel tokens. Treetop Ambusher has dash, and that means you can basically play it every turn with dash, and if it doesn't die, it goes back to your hand, so you can trigger creature fall repeatedly with it. And you don't actually have to attack with it, so you can really see this as just pay 2 mana to trigger creature fall in some cases. Trumpeting Herd makes you 2 elephant tokens, but on 2 separate turns, thanks to Rebound, and because of that, that means, again, creature fall in 2 separate turns. Birthing Boughs lets you make a creature every turn if you have a bunch of spare mana laying around, and that is a good way to trigger creature fall every turn. So, as I said, a bunch of these cards make tokens and help you go wide. Battle Screech, Squirrel Nest, Splicer's Skill, Recruit the Worthy, Trumpeting Herder, Birthing Boughs, they all help you go wide. So this color pair, in addition to just having that creature fall angle, also has stuff going on with Mass Pump. It has 3 cards that can pump your whole team at common and uncommon. Scale Up for 6 mana can make all those tokens into 6/4s. Knight of Old Benalia gives +1/+1 to everything when it enters the battlefield. And Rock's Veteran has Battle Cry. So this color pair, both creature fall and tokens really. What are rares that support this? Well, there is Force of Virtue, which pumps your whole board. There is also Deep Forest Hermit, which gives you a bunch of squirrel tokens. There's also Ayula's Influence, which can make it so that even if you're hitting pesky lands when you want to trigger your creature fall effects, you can still discard a card and make a bear and thus trigger creature fall. Astral Drift is a way to make creatures be temporarily exiled, thus they come back into play and can potentially trigger creature fall. It doesn't come into play again until the end step, so you have to sort of time things correctly to get value out of it, but it can happen. Crashing Footfalls makes you creature tokens, so it fits well into this deck. Genesis makes it so that you can get a creature back every upkeep potentially from your graveyard, and that means you can trigger creature fall a little more consistently. So that's green-white. Let's look at blue-white now, which is all about blinking and bouncing. This is one we've seen a lot. Some of these color pairs are pretty unique. This one isn't that unique, but our Signpost Uncommon is pretty unique and actually, I think, incredibly powerful. So it's a 3-mana 1/1. That's horrible. But first of all, when a creature is exiled from the battlefield, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Second of all, it exiles things on its own, so it lets you blink things. And the idea is, with both blinking and bouncing your own creatures, to abuse their Enter the Battlefield abilities. And Soul Herder lets you abuse Enter the Battlefield abilities while also making itself a lot bigger. And that seems pretty good to me. Worth noting too, by the way, that yeah, the ideal thing to do with blinking and bouncing is to get huge advantage out of Enter the Battlefield triggers. Sometimes even just little things like making your creature who just attacked get exiled so it comes back into play untapped can also be some nice value. But obviously the idea is to exile temporarily or bounce your own creatures so you get the Enter the Battlefield trigger. So what ways are there, in addition to Soul Herder, to blink and bounce things? Well, there's Ephemerate, which we already saw, which I think is really great because it does it twice for only 1 card because of Rebound. There's Settle Beyond Reality, which has a blink effect attached to a removal spell, so that's pretty nice. There's Blizzard Strix, who asks that you have another snow permanent, but it lets you blink something when you do. There's Cunning Evasion, which I don't know how I feel about in general. It seems sort of like a weird enchantment. Could also be useful with ninjas. I think that's the main idea, but I don't think I like it in either case. But the fact is, it can return creatures to your hand, and if they have Enter the Battlefield abilities, you're going to be pretty happy about that. There's also Mana War, which is both a creature with an Enter the Battlefield ability and a card that you can use to blink a creature with an Enter the Battlefield ability, or return it to your hand and then play it again to get the trigger again. String of Disappearances is especially interesting because I think most of the time you do want to use it on your opponent's stuff. But if you have a bunch of extra mana laying around and you have creatures with powerful Enter the Battlefield triggers, you can String of Disappearances and then pay the 2 blue and then maybe pay the 2 blue again to bounce a bunch of your own stuff, which doing in response to removal is already pretty nice. So that's something to keep in mind. And then there's Soul Herder too. There's also Moonblade Shinobi. Remember, all the ninjas in their ninjutsu allow you to return a creature to your hand. So if a creature has a good end of the battlefield trigger, as we talked about when we talked about ninjas, you can return it to your hand with the Shinobi if it attacks and gets through without a problem. And then you not only get to return a creature to your hand, you also get the 1/1 blue illusion, and you have a ninja in play now. So what kind of stuff are we blinking and bouncing in this color pair? Well, Blizzard Strix can do it to other things that have into the battlefield abilities after you do it to it, which can sort of result in a chain reaction and sometimes end up giving you some extra value. It's not the most exciting thing to do it with, but it is something you can do it with. Similarly, Fairy Seer, not the most exciting thing to do it with, but Scrying 2 in a pinch sometimes is a good way to find your way out of a game. There's Mana War, which you can blink or bounce, and it can also bounce things itself. Pondering Mage, which lets you do the ponder effect every time it comes into play, so blinking or bouncing it is nice. Tribute Mage is only going to be worth it if you have enough artifacts in your deck, but if you do, the fact that it draws you an artifact when it comes into play is nice. Watcher for Tomorrow is a card that I love, as already mentioned, I think, and it's really, really good in this deck because you can easily get the Hideaway on it going, blink it, get the card that you put under it with Hideaway back into your hand, get it back into play, do Hideaway again, and you can just get things going really effectively with Watcher for Tomorrow, and it's always going to be gaining you a lot of value, basically just drawing you cards. There's also Irregular Cohort, which gives you a 2/2 every time it blinks. There's Knight of Old Benalia, who pumps your whole team every time it comes into play. There's Vesper Lark, which gets you back a 1 or less power creature from your graveyard anytime it leaves the battlefield. So it doesn't do it on entering, it actually has to be blinked. And you have to have enough creatures that have 1 power in your deck for this to be worth it. Worth noting that Soul Herder has 1 power, and that could be a particularly nice thing to get back. There are also plenty of other creatures that have 1 power that are worth playing, like Fairy Seer. So I'd say you need 4 or 5 cards with 1 power maybe to make it worth it. But the fail case of the card is still that it's a 3 mana 2/1, so it's with flying. So it's probably usually worth playing anyway, but worth blinking it in a world where you have lots of 1/1s in your graveyard. So what rares fit into this? Well, one of them doesn't really fit into this in any sort of special way. It's Unsettled Mariner. It doesn't do anything with blinking, but I have it here because it's blue-white, and it has a nice effect. I mean, it makes your opponent pay 1 more for removal spells, basically. Astral Drift is really sweet. Either when you cycle it or when you cycle period, you get to blink a creature, and that's really nice. If your deck has a lot of cycling, Astral Drift plus just 1 into the battlefield trigger creature, especially one of the more powerful ones, can just take over a game completely. Just keep blinking your Mana War, for example. Ranger Captain of Eos. Now, he's not going to be worth blinking unless you have a few cards in your deck with converted mana cost 1 or less, so keep that in mind. Urza, every time he comes back into play, he makes a artifact creature token, and that creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So each time you blink Urza and you get another artifact token, the other artifacts will get bigger. And that also means you can add more mana to your mana pool, so it's a pretty nice effect with Urza. Mist Syndicate Naga is nice because it has ninjutsu, meaning it can help you blink things, and it's one of the more powerful ninjas because it does make copies of itself. Bizarre Trade Mage is nice because sometimes you want to trigger that ability as much as you can, and this deck can do that. So that's blue-white, all about blinking and bouncing. Now let's move to black-green, which is a graveyard deck. The last 2 color pairs in general, black-green and then red-green, which we'll finish up with, are both graveyard decks. And they have some similarities, but I would say that the black-green graveyard deck is more interested in doing stuff with creatures in the graveyard, and the red-green graveyard deck is more interested in doing things with lands in the graveyard. As you can see here with Rot Widow Pact, for example, it needs creature cards in your graveyard to eat, and when it can, it puts a 1/2 spider into play with reach, and then each opponent loses 1 life for each spider you control. Usually that will mean 2 at a minimum, and if there are other spiders in this set, plus as you do this, it sort of snowballs. And that's a good representation of how this deck can use the graveyard as fuel for a powerful mana sink ability like this one. But it does have to be creatures, and there are a few other cards in this color pair that specifically ask you for creatures, though there are others that don't really care whether it's a creature or not. So, for example, Dregscape Sliver has Unearth itself, and it gives slivers in your graveyard Unearth. Now, this is the only sliver that's in black. There's 1 in green as well, so getting them together isn't going to be that common, but the fact of the matter is, this is a 2 mana 2/2 with Unearth 2, and that's some decent graveyard value. So you can get value out of it out of your graveyard, and to me that means it's a good fit for this deck. There's also another card with Unearth, First Sphere Gargantua, which is pretty great with Unearth. I mean, a 6 mana 5/4 that makes you lose a life and draws you a card is already kind of okay. But when you add Unearth to it, the fact that you get to do it again, that into the battlefield trigger all over again, in addition to, having a 5/4 with haste, that's pretty nice. Graveshifter gets you a creature back from your graveyard, again, specifically a creature. Rank Officer both helps you load your graveyard because when it enters the battlefield, you can choose to discard a card, and if you do, you get a 2/2 zombie. Usually, I think what you'll be discarding is probably a land, but he can also exile creature cards from your graveyard, again, specifically creature cards, and each opponent loses 2 life. Return from Extinction, I have it here too. This deck has changelings, for example, like Graveshifter. It also has some other overlapping creature types, and if you have enough of those, Return from Extinction will be a nice way to get creatures back from your graveyard. Unearth lets you reanimate a smaller creature from your graveyard. Web Weaver Changeling specifically checks to see if you have 3 creatures in your graveyard, and if you do, it gains you 5 life. Again, specifically creatures. Regrowth lets you return a card from your graveyard to your hand. Cards with Threshold, of which there are 2, are also pretty good in this deck because you can fill up your graveyard. So Nimble Mongoose will frequently be a 1 mana 3/3 with Shroud. Mother Bear has an ability she can use from the graveyard. Excavating Anurid has Threshold and it makes it bigger. It also lets you sacrifice a land and draw a card if you want to. So how do you fill your graveyard? Well, at common and uncommon, there are lots of nice ways to do it. One of them is Glacial Revelation, which we looked at with the Snow deck. I do think generally you probably want to have Snow in your deck for this to be worth playing. It is worth noting, with one single card, you can get Threshold if you miss completely on Snow permanents. And maybe that matters if your deck has enough cards with Threshold, but as we just noted, there's only 2. They are both commons, though. But I think in general, this will fill your graveyard for you, but you probably want to hit 1 or 2 Snow cards with it in an ideal world, so I would keep that in mind. Winding Way lets you choose creature or land, which is kind of nice because it works in both of these decks to get whatever it is into the graveyard they want. Then you put all cards of the chosen type into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Ransack the Lab, another card that gives you some card selection on top of your library, then puts the rest into your graveyard. And Rank Officer, which we saw, helps you discard a card into your graveyard. Rares that work in this deck, well, there's Hogak, Arisen Necropolis, who has Delve, an ability that lets you exile things from your graveyard to pay for his mana. He also has Convoke, which is a cool combination, and he can also be played from your graveyard, which is all really cool. Not so cool, you can't spend mana to cast him, so you have to be making sure you either can Convoke or Delve him, but this deck can probably Delve him pretty well. Yawgmoth Thran Physician is really strong in general, but it is really good at loading up your graveyard. You sacrifice creatures, you can discard cards to proliferate. You can load up your graveyard with what you need. Nether Spirit can come back from your graveyard, and Genesis, who we saw earlier, also lets you bring things back from your graveyard. So, as I said, the black-green deck is a graveyard deck, a little more interested in creatures. Red-green, also a graveyard deck, but it's a little more interested in lands. Ruination Rider is the signpost uncommon for red-green. It deals damage to any target equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. If you needed motivation for putting lands into your graveyard, this is a really good card to motivate you to do it because that is incredibly powerful. You can kill creatures with this. If you just have 2 lands in your graveyard, you're pretty much in business with this. And if the game goes long enough and you can load up your graveyard enough, he can maybe just kill your opponent on the spot, and that's pretty cool. So what other land and graveyard payoffs do we have, in addition to Ruination Rider? Well, we have Magmatic Sinkhole, and it doesn't actually care about lands, to be fair, but it is a card that is in this graveyard-based color pair, and it lets you delve things out of your graveyard to pay for this powerful removal spell. Generally, you may not actually want to exile your lands, it's worth noting, because Ruination Rider and other cards want them, but if you're loading up your graveyard in general, Magmatic Sinkhole is going to be pretty good. Or Scale Guardian costs 1 less for each land card in your graveyard, so like Ruination Rider, it wants as many lands in the graveyard as possible. And I have a feeling that if you get at least 2 in your graveyard, lands that is, you're going to feel pretty great about it because you're paying 5 for a 4/4 Flying Haste. Even if you get to 6 mana on it, you're doing kind of okay. That's Volcanic Dragon, right? So Marasa Behemoth is one that only cares if there's a single land in your graveyard. You have a little bit of both here. Cards that care about as many lands as possible, like Orscale Guardian and Ruination Rider. And then there's cards like Marasa Behemoth, who just cares if there's one. And if there is, he's a 6 mana 8/8 with Trample, instead of a 6 mana 5/5 with Trample. There's also Igneous Elemental, Like Marasa Behemoth, he only cares if there's a single land. If there is, he only costs 4 mana, and that's kind of insane because he's already kind of good. A 6 mana 4/3 that does 2 to a creature, I'm already on board with that. I'm not loving it, but I'm on board with it. A 4 mana 4/3 that does 2 to a creature, that's one of the best cards in your deck. So it is a really good reason to be doing this. There aren't a ton of these payoffs for getting lands in your graveyard. There are really only 4, right? Because Magmatic Sinkhole just cares about the graveyard generally. But the ones that there are really, really powerful. They're all things that should really make you want to be getting lands in your graveyard. And I mean, Igneous Elemental and Marasa Behemoth are just commons. And if you can just load your deck up with those and a bunch of ways to load lands into your graveyard, you're going to have a pretty good deck. So how do you get lands into your graveyard? Well, one way is with Alpine Guide, who both searches up a mountain out of your deck for you, but then when he dies, he makes you sacrifice a mountain. So he gets a mountain in there in a roundabout way. Geomancer's Gambit is kind of a weird one. You can use it to destroy your own land and then draw a card, which, hey, you know, drawing a card is good. It also works, by the way, retroactively. I didn't mention it. It works in the blue-red deck as a way to make sure you drew 2 cards in a turn. It can also help you fix in a weird sort of pinch. You can use it to blow up a land that you don't need and get fixing. But here, if you really have a lot of ways of getting value out of lands in your graveyard, blowing up your own land, drawing a card, and searching your library for a basic land might not be that bad. Throes of Chaos is a weird one. It has both Cascade and Retrace. Retrace is what matters here because Retrace lets you discard a land card from your hand to cast it from your graveyard. It doesn't actually have any effect on its own, except that it cascades, which means that you not search your library, but you flip cards from the top of your library until you hit a card that costs 3 or less mana, in this case. Then you cast that card for free. So it's going to give you an effect every time, but in addition to also discarding lands, and that's what this deck wants to be doing anyway. Our friend Hollowhead Sliver lets us rummage, which means you can discard lands. It's also Winding Way, which we saw, can help you throw lands in your graveyard. Nantuko Cultivator can make you discard as many lands as you want to when he comes into play, and he gets a +1/+1 counter for each one. So a particularly good way, maybe, of loading up your graveyard with lands. Glacial Revelation, which we already saw, can throw a few lands in the graveyard. Springbloom Druid's pretty cool because it lets you sack a land when it comes into play, and it gives you fixing because it lets you search up 2 basic lands, and that's a nice combination. There's also cycling lands in this set, which will be particularly good in this deck because it wants lands in the graveyard. So what rares are there that fit into this color pair? Well, there is Ayula's Influence, which lets you discard lands to make bears. There's Genesis, good in the graveyard in general. This deck will be good at throwing cards in the graveyard in general, just like the black-green deck is. And Genesis is at its best when it's in the graveyard in most cases. Tectonic Reformation gives all your lands cycling, which is pretty cool for this deck. Seasoned Pyromancer is interesting because obviously in an ideal situation, maybe you want to discard non-lands so you get a 1/1 red elemental creature token, but you don't have to. I mean, a 3 mana 2/2 that lets you rummage twice, which is what this does, is already really good. And if you can pitch 2 lands or even 1 land with it to help fuel things, you're going to be in pretty good shape. Then, of course, it has ability that it can use in the graveyard. So if you accidentally mill it, you're still going to get some value out of it. And there's also the really, really weird Planeswalker that debuted in this set, Wrenn and 6, who a lot of people are trying to figure out lore-wise what Wrenn and 6 is. Don't really know, but what I do know, pretty good in this deck, and obviously it's included here in red-green specifically as sort of a signpost mythic rare, if you will. For +1, it gets you lands back from your graveyard, and its -7 gives all your instants and sorceries in your graveyard Retrace, which means you discard lands to cast them. So you can fuel itself with that +1, and then use the ultimate eventually, and then fuel it. And it can also do 1 damage to any target. That part, not particularly related to this archetype, but pretty nice. So those are the 10 color pairs in Modern Horizons. This set looks really cool. I think all the color pairs, maybe with the exception of some of the tribes, are fairly unique takes either on things we've seen before or things we've never seen before. And this format looks like it's going to be a lot of fun and probably fun to draft a considerable amount of. It's something I'm looking forward to doing. I'll, of course, be recording drafts and streaming drafts of this format along with War of the Spark at the same time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future content of mine, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.